Welcome to this month's Iris session, brought to you by BrightRock, provider of the first ever life insurance that changes as your life changes. I'm David O'Sullivan, and today we're here to talk about things to do over the holidays. 'Tis almost the season to be jolly, and with the end of year madness being as mad as it is, we know some of you haven't done much planning yet. And that's why we're going to talk about things to do over the holidays. Are there any things to do nearby? What should you add to your reading list? And if you're a parent, how are you going to make the most of the time you'll get to spend with your kids? Today's Iris session aims to unpack some exciting options to see you through this special time. Now, joining me in the studio today, I have three special guests, all of them writers and all of them, I hope, experts in what to do. I'll start with Nechama Brody, simply because I've known her the longest. Nechama, good to see you. Again, a CV as long as my arm, but I'm just going to call you author. And specializing as well
good.
Recently.
Author, that I can show off my book
Exactly.
and tell people what to do, which is about my favorite thing in the whole world. My children will tell you.
Well, the thing is, you've written a book about Joburg, which I've found absolutely fascinating, not only about the history of Joburg, but also things to do and places to go to that I'd never considered or didn't even know about. And today, this morning, you bring along the Cape Town book, and I presume it's going to do the same thing.
I hope so. Everybody thinks it's been written for foreign tourists, but really, I think the same with the Joburg book. It's written primarily for people who live in the cities and who want to rediscover their own places, even if they're new to the city or if they've lived there forever. I mean, I think particularly people who've grown up in a space, you become so familiar with it. It's like your own kitchen. You think you know everything, and then you discover there's a secret cupboard.
Yes.
So this is the secret cupboard, I hope.
Well, we're going to go and open up that cupboard and prowl around inside. And I know you're a mum as well, so you know what it's like to entertain the kids.
Yes.
My next guest, I'm going to call him a former poet laureate for the Gordon Institute of Business Science, simply because, Kojo, I've never had to say anybody's a poet laureate.
It was a lovely thing to be able to put on one's CV, being called a poet laureate. It sounds very distinguished and very important.
But it does seem that you're out of place here in talking about things to do with the holidays. You've got a few more arrows in your quiver, haven't you?
Yeah, I'm a bit of a schizophrenic professional. I've worked in multiple industries, and so I find that I define myself less by what I actually do, and more by the things that I hope are important, which is kind of what I'm passionate about and what I value most in life.
And is traveling and exploring and that kind of thing part of your passion?
Yes, I mean it is traveling, it's reading. I mean I read a lot, and as they say, that's the greatest form of travel.
Yes.
When you can't afford plane tickets, especially in this day and age.
Yeah.
So I enjoy traveling, I enjoy reading, I enjoy interacting with different spaces and different cultures. I'm also the proverbial fly on the wall writer. A lot of times I prefer to actually sit and watch than engage with spaces. But
okay, a lot of things done vicariously. I'm very happy with that. And Kate Else also with us. And Kate, we're going to restrict it to travel writer, if that's okay for now. We could go digital marketing and things like that, but not today.
It's the easiest. My background is actually in journalism. I used to be the content editor for South African Tourism, and I started freelance travel writing about 2 years ago.
So do you have some hidden secrets for us that you can share with us later on in the program?
Let's hope so.
Well, let's find out. You're not a mom or anything like that?
No, I'm not.
Okay, so I've got the parents over here. We're the three. I don't know why I tend to focus on that, but it does seem that holidays, while we go into them thinking, well, thank goodness we can now relax, within a few days we're going, I wish the kids were back at school.
Absolutely. No, it's complete.
So really it is a case of how do we keep the kids entertained? Is that a big problem for you, Nechama, or have you worked it out?
No, parenting is constant learning and changing, especially they keep on growing older. So the things that worked for them last year or the year before, now they need new things. And it's that balance of allowing them to also use gadgets, so iPads or phones or Game Boy type, whatever they're called these days. You can tell how old I am, sorry.
That's right. PSPs, PS3s,
I really don't know what any of them do. I just check for violence and sex and make sure that there's not too much, or if there is, that I can explain it and we have a discussion around it. But how do I balance that out with books? And thank goodness both of my sons read a lot. And outdoor activities, and then other stuff that I think is cool. But of course, what I think is cool is not always what they think is cool. It's like, oh, Mom, why are we at this museum again?
Yeah, this is so lame.
I'm totally getting the eye rolls now, so it's awful. I have an old enough child who's eye rolling me. Everything's lame.
I'm presuming these are teenagers then.
Nearly. I've got one that's kind of approaching that. I had, it was terrible. Yesterday morning, I was lecturing him about something and he started going like this. And I said, "Stop it, that's rude." And he looked at me and said, "I'm not being rude, Mom. I'm imitating Pac-Man."
Okay, well, there's a game for them to play.
Well, there's context. I mean, you understand Pac-Man,
Yeah,
right?
no, it was...
How do you keep your kids entertained over the holiday period, Nechama?
A mix of things. So first of all, I remember reading when my kids were very young that the importance of children being bored. So I think having over-structured days is a recipe for disaster. I think that there has to be space for children to do nothing. And in that nothingness, to find something to do. That's when children invent games. So for me, the idea of kids being able to play in a park or in a garden or even inside a house if the weather isn't good, but being forced to not have TV as a backup or no structure around them. So I think that is part of the space that you need to create for kids, but then also make that your own space too, so that you don't then have to monitor them and supervise them all the time. Beyond that, I like things where, especially if we're traveling or if we're going on a road trip, where the road trip becomes part of the curiosity. And I think that's why I write history books, is because I was that child that was always asking my dad, "What is that? Why is that there? What does that sign mean? Where does it go?" So to treat, for example, a long journey in the car as a space where you can actually have conversations around things. And not just around what is a windmill and what does it do, but why do people live here? And why are towns divided in certain ways? And why is this town busy and this town quiet? And all of those sorts of, so I like that conversational part. If I was in Joburg with my kids, the places that I would do a lot of would be Saibono, because I think that place is just huge and magical.
I'm delighted that you've raised that already. It's on my list of things to ask about. I believe that it's a fascinating place for kids to go to. I know very little about Saibono. Give me a sense of a couple of the things. I do promise you, Kojo and Kate, I am coming to you. But
so there's cool stuff that you can sort of activity-wise. Sometimes they often during the holidays they usually have activity programs for kids, which is that's when I take my children there, and they're eye-rolling and telling me how lame it is until they actually get to the part where the guy blows up a huge flame or pops a balloon and makes an exploding noise in the amphitheater. Then they get excited. But there's little gadgets all over Saibono. So it's the science museum for kids, and there's an area where they can build stuff, and then there's this giant dome where you can put your hands on and make static electricity and try and test how sound travels and things like that. And it's a very safe space for kids to run around as well, which I think they feel that. So they feel completely comfortable running ahead of you onto the next level and finding what appeals to them. So instead of me having to say, "Okay, you do this now," they get to adventure through the space a bit. And I think that's what's really important. What I think malls don't give us and overstructured activity doesn't give us is their ability to choose and engage with the thing that appeals to them. What is the bright, shiny science toy, in this case, that actually draws them into it? So I think that's exciting. And I know we'll talk about books a bit later, but books are always a big part of what we do on holiday. The kids when they pack their clothes and their bags, they also choose which books they're going to take with. And they'll usually get some books as gifts over the holidays as well. And again, that's something that they can either read in the car or for themselves find a kind of quiet space where they can just disappear into another world. Maybe they don't want to be with their brother or their mom or their nagging mom for half an hour. So the book becomes then somewhere where they can actually find their own little holiday within the holiday. I think
you used this word museum, and I remember growing up, if you told me museum, I was turned off immediately. Now I just love museums and try to get my kids to love museums as well. Saibono, does that appeal to your inner child, Kojo?
It does. I haven't actually, and now that you're saying, I'm like, oh yeah, that's another thing to think about. But I haven't explored this space fully, and my kids are still young. My son is 8, my daughter's 4.
Yeah.
But especially my son, that's the kind of stuff that he finds cool and that he enjoys. So we've done the dinosaur shows when they were here, because both my kids enjoy that experience. So yeah, it's definitely on the list. But also, I just came out of, the last year I came out of a quite a high pressure intensive job. I was working for the magazine Destiny Man, which meant I was traveling a lot and I was constantly away and constantly under pressure. And one of the reasons, after 4 years, one of the reasons I left, not the only reason, but one of the reasons I left was I felt like I was living a parallel life to my family.
Right.
You know, so I'd come in and they were also unconcerned. I'd tell my son, listen, I'll be dropping him on Monday morning. I say, listen, I'll see you on Friday. He's like, where are you going? I'm like, no, I'm just going to France for a couple of days. He's like, okay, cool. Could I get a jacket? Go well. And he was very, kind of very nonchalant about it. And that bothered me to a certain extent. And for the last year, I work from home. So for the first couple of months, they didn't know what to do with me because I was constantly there, like every night. They go to school, I take them to school, they come back from school and I'm there. But I really believe in this idea of kind of presence, presence over presence.
Yes.
And
Existing rather than something you unwrap.
Yeah.
Okay.
And because of that, the way the year has run is I've had the opportunity to do a lot more stuff with them. But we also try to monitor how much time they spend on different things. So yes, they can play on consoles, they can play on tablets, and my son has his own tablet. But after an hour, it's like, listen, get out of my house. It's warm outside.
Yeah.
And I'm fortunate enough to live in a complex where my son after school will run out the gate, and we're not sitting worried about where he is, because the kids play on the streets, and we've watched them all grow up together. And for holidays, with the holidays coming, it's never actually been a problem of feeling like they're, like I want them to go back to school.
Yeah.
We tend to chill a lot. So it's, the kids will be in the pool and you kind of sit on the patio and you read, and when they get tired, they'll come and have something to eat and maybe watch a little TV. I'm fortunate that both my children are very active and they like playing outside and they like playing with their friends. And then we also do structure certain things. So this last week for the first time, I'm the one actually doing the planning of the things that we need to do. And that's why I was saying Sibona is an interesting one.
Yeah.
Because there's also, we'll go to the bird gardens in Monte Cassino because they both,
Yes.
My daughter loves snails. She randomly picks up snails and puts them in her pocket or her little handbag.
It is slightly surprising for a little girl. I don't want to stereotype them, but good for her.
She likes digging and she likes animals and nature. They've been nagging me for a dog for about a year and a half now. So we'd go.
It's time to relent, Kojo. You get the dog, and that'll occupy them.
Once I get a bigger house, because also I grew up in a house with 4 to 5 dogs, so I spent my weekends cleaning up.
Yes.
Yeah.
Every weekend, between that and washing the cars. So I know that at this stage, also my wife was like, let's get a dog. And I'm like, okay, this is what a dog involves. So I was like, this is how much food costs. These are all the things that we have to do.
Plus, if you go away in the holidays, you need a dog sitter.
That's right.
And for me, I
how
don't
many
want
pairs
one
of
of those
shoes
small
have you
ones.
lost to the puppy?
Just when he was a puppy. He doesn't eat my shoes anymore now. He does steal fridge magnets off my fridge, though. He's a staffy. He eats everything. It's awful.
Okay. But you've given us another nice idea that bird park at Monte Cassino is fabulous.
Exactly. And I've been looking at this Bounce, the whole...
Apparently that's amazing.
Bounce with all the trampolines.
Yeah.
All the moms keep saying that we should go, and I'm like, I'm too old.
No,
Me.
You're not going to go
not-
bouncing
I'm
in
not-
Kama.
I'm not
Let
bouncing.
me
There's-
assure
no.
you.
Yeah, but there's space for everyone.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things that if you do with your kids, it's lots of fun. So there's adults and younger ones. And I haven't been on the trampolines. My son went for a birthday party because it's always fully booked.
That's right.
I'm hoping that we tend to stay in Joburg over December because everybody kind of goes to Cape Town and goes everywhere else. And leaves room, all of a sudden there's breathing room. You walk into shops and there's 3 people wanting to help you.
Yeah.
Whereas before, normally you can't find even one person to help.
You're presuming Bounce is not going to be fully booked.
But yeah, well, I've
Good
already
luck on that one.
I've been online last night. That's what I was doing. I was online looking at dates, coordinating. We're looking at that. We went to something recently which I wasn't aware of, Acro Branch. Which is in Melrose.
Yes, that's lovely.
And it's
what happens there?
It's zip line obstacle
Yes, the
courses.
bottom of the bird park sort of area.
It's James and Ethel
James and Ethel Grey
Grey
Park,
Park.
by the highway.
I know that.
And if you're older, you would associate it with kind of people and plots and books going on there. But this is kids and a nice, exciting
So
kind of swinging
it's
things.
for kids from 2 to 5. 5 to 11, 11 to 18, as well as adults. They have zip lines, they have a whole obstacle course you go on.
Not for very little kids, though. You have to be a certain height to be able to
Yeah.
go onto the zip lines. But once you do it, it's
My
amazing.
my 4-year-old is, and she's tiny, and she was on it, and
Yeah.
you know, it's my son really enjoyed it. So he's been going. So when are we going back? When are we going back? And we have a group of friends that, you know, we became friends when we were all single and then getting married, and our kids are also growing up together. So what we try to do is, even during the course of the year, very regularly do things together with the kids. And for one of my friends, the son, his birthday party, they had it there, and it was lots of fun. I mean, I didn't go in anything, but you're sitting there and going, we have to come back for this, as a family and as a
How
group.
fabulous is that? We're getting them out of the house and getting them active,
Absolutely.
getting them exercising as
Absolutely.
well, because they're going to stagnate in front of those iPads, and I know on PlayStations how difficult it is to get them away.
I mean, I go, listen, get out of my house, go run around, burn off that energy, and you can come back.
But you're lucky in that complex. We're not in that environment where I can tell them, because if you've got a pack of kids,
Yeah.
they tend to find their
Yeah.
own games and
Yeah.
amuse themselves. I'm not in that space.
The interesting thing, I find with my children is that between the 8 and 4-year-old, when it's just the two of them, they're fabulous together.
Really?
So when it's just
he got weird kids.
Yeah,
Sorry.
that's-
I mean, it's like I'm
No,
going here on balance. Just
no, when it's just the two of them, they're great
aliens.
together. The minute you know there's other people around, other children, they're constantly fighting.
No, mine are the opposite. They're just, and then the other people, and they're like, everyone comes and says, your children are so polite. I'm like, which children are those? Those aren't my children.
Yeah, at home it's a different thing.
Yeah, completely.
I've got 8 and 11 and 4, and they complement each other, which is fine. And Kate's listening on, going, well, it's a world I don't know, but the world you're going to introduce us to now. You've got some ideas of things to do. I suppose that's one thing that people are always saying. We get out of Joburg because there's nothing to do in Joburg, and I know Nakama's got some ideas as well. But I'm going to stick with you now, Kate, because you've got a whole lot of ideas. In fact, you've got some images for us as well. So let's go to our first of the images that Kate can talk to us about, and places, things to do in Joburg. Well, give us some notion. Is Joburg as boring as people think? What have we got there?
No, definitely not. A lot of these things, I tend to spend a lot of time in the inner city. I find that Joburgers, and you'll probably agree, they don't spend enough time. They're very scared. It's a scary place. You can't drive in. The reality is when you drive into the inner city on a weekend, it's pretty much empty. You've got the streets to yourself. So a lot of these images are things in and around Joburg. A lot of them are from the inner city. This, for instance, is the newly opened 27 boxes in Melville.
What it looks like. I haven't seen that yet.
So they've developed this entire complex out of containers, and besides the interesting architecture, what I find what's really nice about it is that it's a really great space for local designers, small local eateries, and a few other sort of popular brands like Paul's Homemade Ice Cream.
Paul's Ice Cream.
Paul's
Yeah.
ice cream.
Yeah, no,
It's a goodie.
That's done very well.
It's worth the trip just today.
So that's Melville. Okay, what have we got there?
This is the living room in Mabaneng, which is a really, really awesome afternoon sundowner spot in Joburg, and you get to look over the city. You kind of feel a little bit removed from the street sitting up there, but it's always a very cool crowd sitting up there. So if you're looking for something very cool to do, it's a good spot.
Mabaneng has really taken off. I remember as they were starting to develop it, and I thought, this is really just shows I have no vision for these things, because it was a particularly run down part of Johannesburg. But these young developers had the image in their mind. They knew exactly what it needed to look like, and it's all come to fruition.
One developer.
That's right.
That's the other thing, and I think it's very much, there's other people in other parts of the city, but it's very much testament to one person with a really good idea who's willing to follow it through and find the right investors can transform.
You're right. It
an
was the
entire city.
investors I think I was meeting who understood what the vision. Have you been to Mabaneng?
Yeah, no, I've been quite a few
We're
times.
all cool. We all
Yeah, I
do
can
it
see
all the
that.
time.
Don't know why I asked.
I mean, I say that, but to be honest, it's also, I mean, I stay North Riding, and my life is structured around being able to do as little as possible and spending time with my children. So while I've interacted with the spaces quite a bit, I don't go there a lot. I mean, the funny thing about the living room is that my context of the living room is we shot a TV series there at night in winter. So you're sitting up there, and then you have to cut because of sound, because, you know, from 7:30 all the international flights go out of OR Tambo. So that's my context of the living room. I've never seen it like that. And the picture looks beautiful.
That looks fabulous.
Well, that's what it looks like on a Sunday.
But I agree with what Kate says. That's the center city that's where I don't go north.
Okay. Well, it's good that people are rediscovering the city centre. That's where I jawled all my life as a youngster. I know we've moved away from what the kids can do. Let's have a look at some
Good.
other
It's
ideas.
not only about kids. We need like
Yeah,
grown-ups.
exactly. Okay, what's that, Kate?
I think, a big thing about the inner city as well is the public art, whether organised through the JDA or through the city, and then also the more informal stuff, which is mostly the graffiti. That this image and the image before are both big pieces. This is in Braam, and before is a Faith 47 piece, also closer to the Mabaneng side of the city.
Yes.
And what's really amazing is that if you drive through on a weekend, it's pretty safe to park your car and get out and take some photos. And the scale of these pieces, they're just absolutely massive. So that's the exciting thing. And I think maybe for kids as well, it'd be quite cool for them to go and actually see that.
There are people who do graffiti tours, and they were actually commenting the other day how they loved kids coming on the graffiti tours because then kids draw pictures of the graffiti itself. So it's just such a beautiful derivative of the past experiences. Yeah.
They've been running a lot of school tours now into December, and that's exactly what they're doing.
So
they're taking
cool.
paper with, and the kids are imitating the graffiti on the walls.
Okay, where's that? That looks comfortable.
This is the Landmark Cocktail Bar. It's relatively new as well. It's next to Cafe del Sol Botanica in Bryanston. So it isn't a shopping centre, which I'm not a fan of shopping centres in general, but it's got a nice view out of the windows, and it's pretty swanky if you're looking for a really good treat night out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, next up.
I recently I was working on a campaign called 72 Hours in Soweto, and it's the first time I've ever stayed in Soweto, even though I grew up in Joburg South. And this was actually the Regina Mundi Church. And really, I just chose one image from that particular weekend, and this is this church is absolutely incredible. It's got these beautiful stained glass windows, and that whole area is just so fun to explore. You can do a lot of it on foot, which people are quite surprised about. And a lot of people sort of drive into Soweto, they go to the towers, they maybe have a meal on Vilakazi Street, and then they leave again. But
There's a cute little park just around the corner from the church.
Yes,
There's
that's
a
right.
very cool little park there.
I just think there's so much exploring to do in Soweto, and people are friendly, people want to see you. They get excited when you're South African and you're not sort of an American tourist that's been bussed in for the day.
Yeah, peering from a bus window.
And just to learn this completely different culture when you technically live in the same city boundaries is absolutely fascinating.
And it's amazing how much it's changed from the time when I was reporting on the violence in the 80s to now. The infrastructure development, the roads are fantastic. Getting around Soweto is easy to do. And if you've ever done one of the freedom rides into Soweto, you realize it's an incredible buzz.
Running, not cycling.
Okay, you did the running.
I can't do this.
side
I
of it.
can't. I need to keep my feet on the ground as I fall over.
But I've done 2 or 3 races that go into Soweto, and they are so awesome because you've got the whole community comes out to watch you. It's such a buzz. You've got everyone cheering you on. It's really awesome.
Ironically for me, is because the reason I know the park because I was there this last weekend, but also a friend's unveiling, and her parents' home is literally round the corner from the church.
Oh, okay. That looks like Mikey's Fontaine, am I right?
That is Mikey's Fontaine. So if you have to get out of Joburg, I would urge you to try and find a small town to head to. Instead of Cape Town or Durban, Mikey's is a little bit further than Joburg, but it's about an hour and a half out of Cape Town, and is supposedly the most haunted small town in South Africa.
Well, there's certainly a number of people who've died around Mikey's Fontaine. I just want to go back to this issue
There's
of...
that whole book. Sorry.
Yes.
I want to just exploring the city. You've written about Joburg extensively, Nakama. Have you got some little gems that we should know about?
Well, I'm
things
wondering
to
if
do?
I should add Cape Town in as well, because
I'm
obviously
going to ask you about Cape Town as well.
So, lots of, grown-up gems or sort of children gems. I suppose there's a mix.
Yeah.
I do. Museum Africa is a weird space to explore. I keep on thinking that if enough of us go and explore Museum Africa, then somehow all of the fantastic exhibits that are hidden away in the back rooms will be brought out, and they'll employ more staff to actually make it functional.
When I was a kid, that was my Cybono when I was a kid.
Yeah, but there's the Wits Art Museum, which it does close for a period over the holidays, unfortunately, but during the year, and I think for the next few weeks in any event, is the most incredible space, very small art space. And every month they do family walkabouts or talkabouts often, so they'll take the kids through whatever the current exhibition is, and then they'll do an art activity related to that. So if it's about beadwork, they'll do beading, and if it's a painter, they'll do painting, and they'll discuss it, and they've really worked hard to make it a kid-friendly space, but they also have adult art classes, and all this stuff is free. Sometimes you may have to pay extra for materials, but mostly the classes are free, where they'll do portrait painting or sketching or whatever, and there's a cafe next door. So I think WAM for me it's a sign that how much Joburg really would love more museum and art spaces if people made them accessible, friendly, safe, clean, all of that sort of stuff. We want them. We're not an uncultured city at all. And then other, I suppose, natural spaces like the Melville Koppies, the Roodepoort Botanical Gardens, the Walter Sisulu Gardens that's just, I mean, take a picnic blanket. You cannot find a better patch of lawn in the whole of Johannesburg than those gardens.
No, there's lots of parking and it's accessible, well signposted. These things that the practical parent needs to know, or the practical person needs to know. It's not something that is a schlep to get to. But I found what has really changed Joburg for me is the advent of these Reds, the bus.
The open-top buses.
The open-top buses. So you can jump on the bus and stop wherever you want to go to. Don't have to worry about parking or anything like that, and start exploring. And I'm told that, for example, the Transport Museum, which I remember going to when I was a little...
Transport Museum near Turffontein,
Yeah, I mean, who goes to Turffontein? Now the bus goes there, apart from you, Nechama, and I know my kids are completely crazy about transport. That's going to be great. And the thing is, it's not going to be, that's the day trip. It's a couple of hours there, back on the bus, now what?
That's a brilliant idea, because my youngest son, the one who's not being sarcastic with me yet, has just started watching all of the Fast and Furiouses, and so he's now obsessed with cars. Obsessed. He keeps on asking, I have no idea what to do with it because I'm not a car person. So James Hall is going to be on the list actually next week, I think.
There's also the Workers' Museum in Newtown. In my view of Newtown, it's beautiful how kind of Maboneng and Braamfontein have exploded, as well as other parts of the city. So around Gandhi Square and stuff, you have a lot of little cafes and that sort of stuff cropping up. But I do find that with the development, because in the early 2000s, I used to spend most of my Saturdays in Newtown, outside Market Theatre, and you'd have the actors and the poets and there was couch and coffee, etc. And that space has lost that a little to a certain extent. But I do think if people start going into, I mean, the number of times I've performed in Museum Africa, because there'd be, poetry shows, conferences, all of these things. And it feels to a certain extent like that tension has gone away from that space. So I do think it needs more and more people to start actually engaging with it.
It is the focus of quite a lot of, this isn't travel necessarily, but there's a lot of development being centred around Newtown that's relating back to also the bus rapid transit system and the Gautrain and Park Station, more low-cost housing that's coming up there, and that's why the mall got approved for development there. There are improvements happening at the Market Theatre. So the whole precinct is, and that's JDA-led and city-led, not private investor-led, which is good, because we need the city and the state and the province, whatever, to lead initiatives too. There's that Newtown one, what's it called? There's some new spot in Newtown. It's really cool, apparently.
We're not hip enough.
I'm not hip enough for that. I was busy when it launched. It just launched last week. But so there's threads of things that are coming there too.
That happen at Baseline. I think. And if you, it's still, and I think if you just kind of watch out for it, there's a lot of. I mean, I went to a storytelling event there recently.
And the Orbit.
The
Orbit. Okay, if you're going to go out in Joburg at night without your children or just on your own, because whatever it is, the Orbit is, I think, the best consistent live music in this town right now.
And I was wondering where the live music venues were. I believe Braamfontein comes alive, but I'm out of the demographic. I think I'm probably people look at it. I'm the old bully going in there.
I felt like a tourist in Braamfontein on a given afternoon, and I have a lot of friends who are kind of. I was like, look here, all the cool urban youth, and I have a lot of friends in that space, and I'm interested in sneakers, I'm interested in all of that stuff, but as I guess as a 40-something-year-old, hanging out on the street corner doesn't do it anymore.
Because I feel I can still do that, but apparently.
But I went on a random Thursday afternoon for a meeting, and you're walking down the street and somebody's in the middle of the road and they're doing a photo shoot, and
I think Brown as well. They've got First Thursdays now, so it's this Thursday coming up, where all the galleries are open, the shops are open, the restaurants are open. They close off sections of the streets as well, so it's pretty safe to walk around without worrying about being knocked over by
That's so nice
taxi.
to turn the roads into pedestrian malls.
Yeah.
You can,
And it's an awesome experience, and it's the urban youth, like you say, just completely almost taking back their city. It's very cool.
I do want to move to Cape Town, but getting there is one of the issues. And you made a point right at the beginning where the journey is part of the adventure. Now that's what I'm going to be doing. We're going to Cape St. Francis, but we're going via Smithfield because, well, I don't want the kids, a 4-year-old in a car for more than 5 hours, I know is a nightmare. So I broke the journey up. But what we'll do is we'll go through Reddersburg and go through all these little dorps. And I've gone and looked at photographs of each of them. So the kids have like a treasure map, and they've got to now spot all these things and tick them off their list. They're also researching it, and well, my 11-year-old is. But we're going to get them to go to places that they wouldn't otherwise go to. We're not jumping on an aeroplane. Now, have you got any ideas of places that we should go to? You've given us Mikey'sfontein. Anything else, Kate?
You know, I think when it comes to small towns, there's something to be found along the way in every small town. And people always say to me, well, how do you find these? Because I write a lot about very strange things like frozen yogurt bars in the middle of the Karoo, which you wouldn't think exist. But it goes back to, you mentioned signs earlier. If you see a sign, it means it's a business that wants attention. So just stop if it looks interesting. Yes. And it's about taking the time to do it as well. There's no rush to get to Durban. You're still going to get there. There's no rush to get to Cape Town. You'll still get there.
That rushing thing is what I've discovered when I do long road trips. I try and do parts of it without my kids as well. So their dad will drive some of them, whatever. But it's really nice as an adult, especially when you're used to the nagging children or difficult to be on your own in a car that's driving at the speed limit.
Yes.
I know this sounds terrible, but you can see so much more of the world around you when you're actually at 120 or beneath. If you're rushing there, and I always take the back roads, so there's less traffic and there's a lot more to see. And I have a rule: I'm not allowed to go faster than 120, even if there's no traffic and I can see clear for the next 10 k's. I can't. Well, that's the rule.
That's certainly going to be a part of our road trip. If we see an interesting sign,
we're
going to go and follow it. And I like your idea. It's calling for attention. Yeah. So let's go and answer that call.
And you know, with those small towns, I find everybody is super friendly. They're so excited to see you because they're used to everyone just running by on the highway. And I never ever complain when there's a detour off the N1, because it means that you're going to get to see Philopolis or some crazy town that you never would have stopped in ever before. And you can generally get a great cheap meal. You can hang out with the locals and have a good beer. They'll tell you where to go check out.
Yeah, if you find yourself suddenly going through Craddock, well, it's beautiful, absolutely beautiful. But people tend to go bypass all these places. Eventually we get to Cape Town, which brings us to your fabulous book, and I'm dying to get my hands on that. Give us some gems that are in there, Nakama.
Okay, so just a quick note, the way this book is structured is every section of history has a place where you can actually go and touch that history or walk that history or experience that history. The idea is that history exists around you, and it's the same with the Joburg book, is that there are places where you can stand and be in a place and then know what happened there. And so it's the idea is to connect yourself through geography. So connect yourself to the past through geography. And Cape Town, I think everybody knows about the beaches and the waterfront. And actually, I just said this in an interview I did with the editor of the Cape Argus, where I said, if I could get people to spend less time at the waterfront, people probably hate me saying that, but I mean, why would you travel all the way down to Cape Town to go to a mall?
Yes.
So, I mean, the beaches are fantastic. There's so much to see there, not just Table Mountain, Silverman, I mean, all the beautiful little nature reserves that are around there. I find when I'm with my kids, the things that I always do when I'm in Cape Town, go to the Natural History Museum, which has been undergoing renovations in some parts, but there's dinosaurs, and there's dinosaurs eating other dinosaurs, and there's blood, and there's, kids love blood and dinosaur teeth and stuff like that. And there's a model of a megalodon jaw, and there's the whale well, and you can go into the whale well and listen to the, go, ooh, you can do whale sounds, and it's awesome. I mean, there's the aquarium, but obviously that's at the waterfront. So
Yeah.
you've got
We'll
you've
just
got
do the
crowds and
aquarium.
things
We
like that.
won't go to the mall. We can do the aquarium.
But I mean, which is beautiful. But then related to the aquarium, you have a whole bunch of other marine initiatives all along the coastline, whether it's trying to find the shark spotters. I mean, and so tell your kids about the shark spotters and what they do. I mean, these are guys who literally stand at a high vantage point and check out False Bay or kind of the Atlantic for sharks and have a flag system. And this is a way of changing how we interact with sharks because we're in their space, and reminding us that, or reminding people in general, that you have a much greater chance of being killed by a falling textbook than you do from being bitten by a shark. Things like that. So, and there are shark organizations around the coast as well. And then little museums. So Simonstown has a whole bunch. Well, there's the Naval Museum in Simonstown. And in fact, there are different history museums in Simonstown. Depending on the age of your children, alternative histories are very important too, and they form a very big part of this book, not just Jan van Riebeeck Cape Town. No. In Simonstown there is, I'm going to forget the name, there are two museums. There's a history museum and there's a heritage museum. And one of them, which is in my book, tells the story of the coloured community in Simonstown that was forcibly removed, or mostly the Muslim community that was forcibly removed after group areas. And Simonstown went from being a majority black area to overnight to being a white area. So before group areas, Simonstown was not a little white village. Same with Kalk Bay, actually, or Kalk Bay, apparently. And then you have the District 6 Museum in the centre of town, which is not part of the Iziko chain. It's an independent museum, and it's a small enough museum to do in a couple of hours. And it's so heartfelt and beautiful, and the people who run it aren't just about telling the stories of District 6, they want to tell the stories of the city. So those spaces are amazing. There's the red buses to go on as well. And they do I just did a thing with them when we launched the book. So there are 4 or 5 different routes that you can choose, whether you want to go around to Hout Bay and around the Atlantic seaboard, or you just want to do the inner city. There's lots of little trips you can do there. And Cape Town is very walkable when it's not windy, of course. When it's windy, you should just leave Cape Town, basically, I think.
I think we do have a question about that. But as we're starting to run out of time, you've also got some suggestions, and we've mentioned books. Kojo, you said just sitting, reading a book. That's a fabulous pastime as well. You've got some ideas for books for us, Nechama.
Okay, so I'm hoping you're going to try and remember the order because I've written them down.
Well, here was the first one on our screen.
So some of these are books that I've read, and some of them are books that I want to read. Very much like Kojo, I disappear into books completely. I also do take books on my Kindle because I read fast and I can't necessarily carry 10 kilograms of books with me. But on the beach, Kindle can be a bit of a problem. So I like to mix sort of paper and plastic, as it were. One of my absolute favorite books this year is an author called Patrick Ness. He is best known as a young adult author, but he writes for adults as well. He's won multiple awards as a children's author, and he's a beautiful, wonderful soul as well. But his new book is called The Rest of Us Just Live Here. And if you read any of these sort of teenage, twilight, tropey kind of things where somebody's the chosen one. So his book is, what if you're not the chosen one? What if you actually are a teenager in your last year of high school and you actually just want to get together with the girl that you really like and you just want to get on with it and you wish that all these other chosen ones around you would just leave you alone so you could actually just have a normal teenage life. And it's such a simple premise, and Patrick he's created the most wonderful book. I wrote, when I finished reading it, I literally wanted to fall asleep holding this book like a teddy bear. It was I think adults can read it as well, although definitely it's, I suppose, more aimed at teenagers, but it's just heartening. It's beautifully written. The characters are incredible. It's such an unexpected teen book. And I think so many of the messages that come out of it are incredibly positive and thoughtful. I mean, he talks about, mental illness, but in a really normal way. Everything's normal because that's how life is. Stuff happens. And he just weaves it into this absolutely brilliant story. So that, I think, is probably one of my favorite books of the year or of several years. I really loved it. The Rest of Us Just Live Here by Patrick Ness.
Okay, let's have a look at another book.
So I read quite a lot of science fiction and fantasy or speculative fiction, and there are obviously incredible South African authors who are doing that, but one of my recent discoveries, with my discovery, she's not recent on the scene, is a Nigerian-American author called Nedi Okorafor, and she was out in Johannesburg for the Goethe Institute, had an African Futures conference, and I met Nedi, and she has the most amazing hair, and she's an incredible writer. So she has this vast backlog, this kind of archive of books that I need to go through. She's busy working on new stuff. But so she has 5 or 6 books that she's already published, again, award-winning, from young adult to adult, speculative fiction, science fiction-y stuff, often set in Africa or with African characters, which is, I really enjoy when people sort of approach things that way. So I've read her novella, which is a book called Benti, and I'm hoping over the holidays to sort of find, if I can find them, because not all bookshops keep her, because I suppose it's fairly niche. I mean, African science fiction. Like
yes,
I think we invented it practically.
Not a well-known
so
genre.
there's Zahara the Windseeker I want to find, He Who Fears Death, or Who Fears Death, I'm going to forget half the titles. So I want to actually get through all of these and start catching up on the beautiful stuff that Nedi has written. Okay. The Book of the Phoenix I've got, but that's apparently a prequel or a prologue to Who Fears Death, so I want to read the first one before I read this. And again, just conceptually amazing, beautifully written, and judge a book by its cover. Some of them are gorgeous too as well. So Nedi's on my list. And then if we move on from sort of speculative stuff, I think what we've got next is also solid summer read, crime. Yeah. So Dion Meyer, I love Dion. He's just awesome anyway, but his books are incredible. And I'm hoping to do some work on an Afrikaans project in the next year or so. And I want to, the best way for me to brush up on my Afrikaans is to read Afrikaans books. And I wanted to read Dion's new book, Icarus, but in its original, which I think I can manage. For me, it's a bit like Shakespeare in English. You get into it. Okay. I mean, I speak Afrikaans, just not as well as my Afrikaans friends speak English.
Yes.
But I think also reading it in the original language is, if you can, you should, or you must.
Does Dion translate his own books? Does he write?
I actually don't know who does the translation. I should ask him. I will ask him.
Because he's just so multilingual.
He is. And so I really like Dion's work anyway, so I want to read Icarus, and so that's on the list. And then there's another new author, debut novel, Sally Andrew. Haven't read this, have just heard brilliant things about it, and it is a Karoo mystery. So it's basically, there's this Tannie in the Karoo who loves to cook and writes kind of recipes or something every week for the local paper. I haven't read it, so I'm going on the blurb. And then she becomes this Miss Marple, she starts solving mysteries, which is like, and this is the kind of book you look and think, why didn't I write that book? It's such a brilliant, and apparently it's been snapped up. It's got all these international deals, so it must be really good. And what was that Botswanan Mara Motswe thingy, that Alexander McCall Smith's books?
Yes.
Which started off very nicely and eventually got, unfortunately, I'm sorry to say this, but very boring for me. So I'm imagining that this is going to hopefully have a similar appeal, but just be better because it's local and we'll get it. So that I really, really want to read. Then my kids. So they do actually read books with lots of words in them, but a favorite for them every year is the Guinness Book of Records. Yeah. And we have old Guinness Book of Records dating back to the 1960s. And when I compare those and how they were written and structured and designed to the new ones today, it's a chalk and cheese. But so my kids will spend hours going through the Guinness Book of Records and fight over who gets it. And then in addition, for the car, for when we're on holidays, to stack up on kind of the books that they love, Diary of a Wimpy Kid. My younger child likes, if we can bring up the next book, we've got Super Diaper Baby and Super Diaper Baby 2, which are sort of, they're written almost in a comic book style. So there's words and then there's like lots of drawings, and so part of it is a bit like a comic book. So I think it's quite nice for a young reader who might feel a bit overwhelmed by a solid, heavy chunk of a book. And they laugh. They're literally, they're basically full of poo jokes, as you can imagine, when it's called Super Diaper Baby. So the recipe
11 years old, that is funny.
And then Goosebumps, which is a classic, R.L. Stein, who's written more books than I have years to my life so far, which is frightening in itself. What I really also like about Goosebumps, and as a tip to parents whose kids are starting to read, is I go and trawl secondhand bookshops a lot because books are expensive. And until our government decides to stop charging VAT on books, they're going to remain that way. So secondhand bookshops are often a fantastic place to go and pick up where other people have dumped their kids' books that they've outgrown. And so I often find Goosebumps because there's so many of them. Yes. I think he's got like hundreds out. So to go and find things like that, and where it costs you a lot less, and it doesn't matter if your child takes time to grow into them. So that's for me a very good space to find kids' books. And the last book that I want to mention for summer, this is for me. This is going to be after everything else. So I'm really not into the cheesy books. I cannot read Paulo Coelho. I had to unfollow him on Twitter. It's too much. I'm not one for those inspirational quotes of the day. I'm the one going, Okay, but Elizabeth Gilbert, long before she wrote Eat, Pray, Love, I followed her as a journalist. And she's actually an intriguing journalist and author and a very, very talented writer. And some people may know she's done this TEDx talk, I think, on muses and creativity. So her new book that's out is called Big Magic. And I've just seen some extracts from it. And I've been following her on Instagram, funnily enough. She recently joined Instagram and she posts stuff. And she started posting quotes that really resonated with me. And I don't know if it's because of my age or where I'm at or because I'm a writer or whatever. I want to read this.
Yes.
I want to actually go through it. And I think a really nice way to finish my year and prepare myself for what I hope is going to be an amazing and productive next year is to read something that fills me up with this idea of not being afraid of being creative, but not just platitudes, but actual sort of how do I welcome my muse into my life kind of vibe. So that's on my list for me.
Well, fantastic. And we are almost out of time, but I do have a couple of questions. So let's quickly go through those. I think we might have answered all of them. A question here, we're doing a road trip for our holidays with our children, 7, 10 and 12 in the car. Excited to be away from TVs, laptops, etc. We need tips for keeping them busy in the car that don't involve screen time. That's from Amanda. Who's got the games in the car waxed?
I haven't got the answer for that because I just went to Lesotho with my kids because that's where I grew up. My wife wasn't around, and I got all their movies, all their games, all their books on 2 devices, and they
Kept
sat
them
on
occupied
those
that
things.
way.
Yeah.
Well, I'd like Kate's suggestion of look out for the signs and embrace them. They're the invitation to go and visit.
I think as well, I don't have kids, but I've got a lot of friends that do, and when I travel with them, it's always interesting to see what kids spot that adults completely don't see and we just drive past and ignore. Because they'll point out sort of the cute sign with the little mouse on it, and you know it's a sweet little taste neighborhood where you can stop and buy proper Tunny's rusks, which I wouldn't normally see. You'd sort of, it would just go past. And they also pick up on the icons on a lot of the national road signage, like the museums, the nature reserves that you may not have known about.
Yeah, well, what I'm doing is, as I say, planning the trip so we know what to look out for as we
And
drive.
if you give them breaks regularly, drivers need breaks too. So I think we forget, but when you're with kids, it's forced. With their older child, they said their oldest was 12 of the 3. I found when one of the kids got interested in music, if I let them choose the music that we played in the car. So my oldest son has an iPod, and he had Michael Jackson or something, and we listened to that, which was his choice, and then he was into the music as well. And so we all wound up singing along to it. Reggae actually works really, really well for family sing-alongs, good reggae. And so if they're into the music, then it's not forever, but that gives you half an hour or 45 minutes, an album's worth of, and you're sharing it as an experience, which I also quite like. And then you have to stop and walk around for a little bit and then figure out what the next thing is.
And audiobooks as well. I'm a big fan of the audiobook.
I haven't done that yet. I know everyone keeps saying, but...
I did Andre Agassi's
I did the podcast,
autobiography.
Serial. I did that last year.
Podcasts. Thank you for mentioning podcasts. You've got to load up with podcasts. You go to the iTunes store and click on podcasts and just go mad because there's so much variety for kids, for adults.
That's actually a brilliant idea because then you can have it playing and
it's half an hour.
Yeah.
So, some are 15 minutes. So it's not a case of hour after hour. It's the same thing. Podcast would be one way. We love listening to audiobooks. Thank you. While driving down to Stillby keeps all of us on the edge of our seats, says Christelle. I agree. I think that they're fantastic. And Mandy says, any advice for a windy day in Cape Town? Kids get bored so easily. Mandy, Nchama's advice was get out of Cape Town.
Yeah.
But I'm going to give you a place to go to. Have you ever been to the, I'm sure it's in your book, at Groote Schuur, the Heart Museum?
I actually haven't been inside.
But it's amazing. It's where Chris Barnard carried out the very first heart transplant. But in the operating theatre, with that equipment, it's the real McCoy. And to my amazement, the actual hearts that were transplanted, the one that was removed and the one that was transplanted, all kept there in formaldehyde, I presume.
Yeah, the thing with Cape Town when it's windy is sometimes you'll find areas that are less windy. So I think a good thing is to use social media or something to try and figure out, are there parts of the city that aren't experiencing that? Because Blouberg might be okay, or less windy or something, or bearable, or to find indoor spaces. So I would also look at Iziko museums. They have museum properties around the city, and they often have special deals for kids. I mean, there's the planetarium, there's the Natural History Museum, there's the Burghardt Museum. Some of them there's the Naval History Museum, which is weird. It's more like a learning center and a bit of a museum and it's in the waterfront, but it's fascinating.
Yeah,
so there are indoor spaces.
The aquarium's brilliant.
Or find spaces that are outdoors but that are not in the teeth of the wind.
Yeah.
And again, I mean, I would say like Silvermine, for example, there's a beautiful, quite a kid-friendly hike from the one side of Silvermine up to Elephant's Eye. So you can take your kids to see a cave, which is really, really cool. And it's easy even for small children to make the walk.
I'm going to suggest go up to the Winelands. A couple of hours. It might be an hour and a half away. Have you got any magic places to go to in Cape Town on a windy day?
Not particularly. I think if I was stuck there on a windy day, I would either stay in my hotel room or probably just do a hop from restaurant to restaurant in the CBD and have a course at every single
Spoken like
one.
a true person without kids. I love that idea. Kojo, I'm going to leave the last word with you. What are you doing over the holidays?
We're gonna be around Joburg. I mean, this coming weekend we're going to Franschhoek, but just with my wife, going to Franschhoek for the Bubbly Festival. We do it every year. It's kind of like our little weekend away without the kids. But yeah, I'll be around Joburg. You know, going to Accra branch, spending time with the kids. My son yesterday said, you know, asked me when he goes on holiday and I decide to stop working, can I play some games on the Xbox with him? Because even with that, like a lot of times he'll want to play with me, and I work from home, so I'm busy, I'm working and stuff, and it's just doing stuff for the kids.
I haven't a clue how those gadgets work. I don't know how those games work. My 4-year-old will have to teach me.
I'm a gadget person, and also I think it's important, you know, what you were saying, I think it's important to have some kind of understanding of it, because there's so many risks and there's so much content out there that you have to have some kind of sense of what they're interacting with. And so my son's tablet runs off my Google account, and every week I just go into my app store to see what he's been downloading. And he also, I mean, he's 8, but he also knows that if I find things I don't like, there's the risk of him not having his tablet for a couple of weeks.
Grand Theft Auto doesn't appear there.
No.
We'll wrap it up there. Kate, Kojo, Nechama, thank you very much. I think you've given us a lot of ideas of things to do over the holidays. And that wraps up our IRIS session on the Change Exchange for 2015. I hope that you, as a parent or as somebody who wants to explore things outside of Joburg or even inside Joburg, or needs to explore something for the holidays, we've given you plenty of ideas. From me, David O'Sullivan, have a fabulous Christmas, have a fabulous holiday season. Bye-bye.